The crisp autumn breeze rustled through the quiet suburban neighborhood as 7-year-old Amy clutched her worn teddy bear closer to her chest. Her small feet carried her swiftly down the sidewalk, her heart pounding with each step. She wasn't supposed to leave home alone, but today was different. Today, she had no choice. The familiar sight of Mrs. Chen's house came into view, the kind elderly woman who always waved to her from her garden and sometimes shared fresh-baked cookies with the neighborhood children. Amy had seen her tending to her roses just yesterday, and something in her gentle smile had given the little girl hope. The events of the past few weeks flashed through Amy's mind as she approached the neat white fence. The whispered arguments late at night, the strange people coming and going, and most worryingly, the way her mother's bright smile had slowly faded into a permanent look of worry. But it was what she had discovered this morning that finally pushed her to act. With trembling hands, Amy pushed open the white gate, wincing at its slight creak. The perfectly maintained garden path seemed endless as she made her way to the front door. Mrs. Chen's wind chimes tinkled softly overhead, their gentle sound somehow giving her the courage to keep moving forward. The little girl reached up on her tiptoes to press the doorbell, holding her breath as she waited. Seconds felt like hours until finally, the door opened, revealing Mrs. Chen in her familiar floral apron. The elderly woman's warm smile quickly turned to concern as she took in the sight of her young neighbor, alone and visibly distressed. "I need help," Amy whispered, her voice barely audible as she hugged her teddy bear tighter. "But you have to promise not to tell anyone I came here." The urgency in her voice made Mrs. Chen kneel down despite her arthritic knees, bringing herself to eye level with the frightened child. The story Amy began to tell made Mrs. Chen's blood run cold. Through tearful whispers and clutching her teddy bear like a lifeline, the little girl revealed snippets of conversations she'd overheard, strange packages she'd seen, and most alarmingly, what she'd witnessed that very morning in their garage. Her young mind might not have fully understood everything, but she knew enough to realize something was terribly wrong. Mrs. Chen listened intently, her experienced eyes noting every detail of Amy's behavior, the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, how she flinched at sudden noises, and the dark circles under her eyes that no child should have. With each word, the elderly woman's concern grew deeper, and she knew this wasn't a simple case of a child's imagination running wild. As Amy finished her story, Mrs. Chen made a decision. With a gentle smile that masked her internal alarm, she invited the little girl inside for some hot chocolate. Once Amy was settled safely in her kitchen with a warm drink and cookies, Mrs. Chen stepped into her study, quietly closing the door. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up her phone, but her voice was steady as she dialed 911. The dispatcher on the other end listened carefully as Mrs. Chen relayed the information, her experience as a retired school counselor helping her organize the details effectively. She emphasized the urgency of the situation while keeping her voice low enough not to alarm Amy in the next room. Years of handling delicate situations with children had taught her the importance of remaining calm while taking decisive action. Meanwhile, Amy sat at the kitchen table, her small hands wrapped around the warm mug of hot chocolate. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. The familiar scent of freshly baked cookies and the soft ticking of Mrs. Chen's old clock created a bubble of comfort around her. She didn't know what would happen next, but something told her she had done the right thing by coming here. The sound of approaching sirens was still distant when Mrs. Chen returned to the kitchen. She kept Amy engaged in conversation about her teddy bear's adventures, skillfully distracting her from the growing commotion outside. The little girl had shown remarkable courage in seeking help, and now it was time for the adults to take over and ensure her safety. As the first police car quietly pulled up to the curb, its lights off to avoid drawing attention, Mrs. Chen said a silent prayer of thanks that this brave little girl had trusted her instincts and sought help. What started as a frightened child's whisper would soon set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever. Officer Rita watched from her patrol car as 2 more police vehicles silently took strategic positions around the neighborhood. Her 20 years on the force had taught her that cases involving children required the utmost delicacy. The call from dispatch about a 7-year-old's testimony had immediately set off alarm bells, and the details provided by the elderly neighbor only confirmed her worst suspicions. Through her earpiece, she heard her partner confirm that the back of the house was secured. They had deliberately parked a block away and approached on foot to maintain the element of surprise. The last thing they wanted was to spook anyone inside Amy's house who might be watching the street. Inside Mrs. Chen's kitchen, Amy had finally begun to relax slightly, the warmth of the hot chocolate and the gentle presence of the elderly woman providing a cocoon of safety. She didn't notice the subtle glances Mrs. Chen kept directing toward her window, where glimpses of uniformed officers could occasionally be seen moving into position. "My dear," Mrs. Chen said softly, reaching across the table to pat Amy's hand, "would you like to tell me more about your teddy bear? He looks like he's been on many adventures with you." It was a deliberate attempt to keep the child engaged and calm, drawing on her years of experience working with troubled students. As Amy launched into a story about her beloved stuffed companion, Officer Rita was coordinating with her team outside. The information they had gathered painted a disturbing picture. The house had been under surveillance for suspected illegal activities, but until now, they had no idea a child was at risk. A gentle knock at Mrs. Chen's back door made Amy jump slightly, but Mrs. Chen's warm smile never wavered. "That must be my neighbor returning my gardening shears," she said calmly, though she knew it was Officer Rita. The elderly woman had been briefed via text message about the officer's approach. Officer Rita entered quietly, her uniform concealed under a casual jacket. Her kind face and gentle demeanor were precisely why she had been chosen to make first contact. She had a way of putting children at ease, a skill honed through countless similar situations. "Hello there," she said warmly, as if her presence in Mrs. Chen's kitchen was the most natural thing in the world. "I couldn't help but overhear something about a teddy bear's adventures." She pulled up a chair, maintaining a non-threatening distance from Amy. The little girl looked uncertainly between Mrs. Chen and the newcomer, clutching her teddy bear tighter. Mrs. Chen nodded encouragingly, her presence providing the reassurance Amy needed. Slowly, the child began to open up to Officer Rita, who listened attentively while secretly recording every detail. As Amy spoke, her story became clearer. The strange people visiting their house at odd hours, the heated arguments she could hear through her bedroom wall, and the frightening changes in her mother's behavior all pointed to a situation far more serious than initially suspected. Most concerning was what Amy had witnessed that morning, a heated argument about merchandise and payment that had ended with the sound of breaking glass and her mother's muffled crying. Officer Rita maintained her composed demeanor, but inside, her determination grew stronger with each detail. Through her concealed earpiece, she could hear her team reporting that they had eyes on 2 suspicious vehicles approaching Amy's house. They needed to move soon. "Amy," Officer Rita said gently, "you've been incredibly brave today. Mrs. Chen tells me you walked here all by yourself to get help. That shows amazing courage." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I want you to know that my friends and I are going to help make things better, but I need you to stay here with Mrs. Chen for a little while longer. Can you do that for me?" The little girl nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her small shoulders. Something about Officer Rita's presence made her feel safer, as if the weight of her worries was finally being shared with someone who could actually help. Mrs. Chen suggested they move to her cozy living room where Amy could watch her favorite cartoons. As they settled onto the comfortable sofa, Officer Rita quietly slipped out, exchanging a meaningful look with Mrs. Chen. The elderly woman understood her role: keep Amy safe and distracted while the police handled the situation. Outside, the late afternoon sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the quiet street. Officer Rita shed her casual jacket, revealing her tactical vest underneath. Her team was in position, and the timing had to be perfect. They had identified multiple suspects entering Amy's house, and the priority was ensuring no one slipped away. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on Officer Rita's shoulders as she joined her team. They had one chance to get this right, not just to catch the criminals, but to protect a frightened little girl who had been brave enough to seek help. As she radioed final instructions to her team, she silently promised Amy that her courage wouldn't be in vain. The next few minutes would change everything, but for now, Amy was safe in Mrs. Chen's living room, temporarily lost in the colorful world of cartoons, unaware that her whispered plea for help had set in motion one of the largest operations the quiet suburb had ever seen. The autumn sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting orange rays through Mrs. Chen's floral curtains. Amy sat curled up on the couch, her attention divided between the cartoon playing on the television and the occasional muffled sounds from outside. Mrs. Chen kept a watchful eye on the little girl while pretending to knit, her weathered hands steady despite her inner tension. Outside, Officer Rita's team moved with practiced precision. They had confirmed the presence of 5 suspects inside Amy's house, including her mother. Through careful surveillance, they'd identified the ringleader, a man known to law enforcement for his involvement in various illegal operations across the state. The fact that he'd now involved a single mother and endangered a child had pushed this case to the top of their priority list. The operation began with a simple knock on the front door. A plainclothes officer, posing as a package delivery person, stood on the porch with a box. This routine tactic had proven effective countless times before, providing a moment of confusion that often gave them the advantage they needed. When the door opened, events unfolded rapidly. The standard police search warrant announcement echoed through the quiet street, followed by the coordinated entry of tactical teams through both front and back entrances. Officer Rita led one of the teams, her heart racing but her movements calm and deliberate. Inside Mrs. Chen's house, Amy jumped at the sudden noise. Mrs. Chen immediately drew the child into a gentle hug, speaking softly about her own childhood memories to distract from the commotion. "When I was your age," she began, her voice steady and warm, "my grandmother taught me how to make paper cranes. Would you like to learn?" Back at Amy's house, the operation proceeded with textbook efficiency. 2 suspects attempted to flee through the garage, the same garage where Amy had witnessed the frightening scene that morning, but were quickly apprehended by the waiting officers. Officer Rita's team cleared the house room by room, discovering evidence that confirmed their worst suspicions about the illegal operation being run from the premises. They found Amy's mother in the kitchen, trembling and tearful. Unlike the other suspects, she immediately raised her hands and began talking, desperate to explain her situation. Officer Rita recognized the signs of someone who had been coerced and manipulated, trapped in circumstances that had spiraled far beyond her control. "My baby," Amy's mother sobbed, "I never wanted her to see any of this. They threatened us. I didn't know how to get out." Officer Rita handed her colleague the handcuffs, stepping forward to speak with the distraught woman. Years of experience had taught her to recognize genuine remorse, and Amy's mother's distress was palpable. As the suspects were led away and evidence was catalogued, Officer Rita took a moment to examine Amy's bedroom. The small space told its own story, perfectly maintained, filled with books and stuffed animals, clearly a sanctuary created by a mother trying to protect her child from the chaos around them. A stack of hand-drawn pictures on the desk caught her eye, each one featuring Amy and her mother together, smiling. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen had successfully engaged Amy in the art of paper crane folding. The little girl's small hands carefully followed the elderly woman's instructions, her face scrunched in concentration. They had created a small fleet of slightly crooked birds, and Amy's pride in her accomplishment momentarily overshadowed her worries. The sun had nearly set when Officer Rita returned to Mrs. Chen's house. She paused in the doorway of the living room, taking in the touching scene before her, Amy and Mrs. Chen surrounded by colorful paper cranes, the little girl looking more relaxed than she had all day. It was moments like these that reminded her why she had chosen this career. "Amy," Officer Rita called softly, not wanting to startle the child. "Could we talk for a few minutes?" She sat down in the armchair across from the couch, maintaining a comfortable distance. The next part of her job required particular sensitivity, explaining to a 7-year-old what would happen next. "Your mom is safe," she began, watching relief flood the little girl's face. "She's been very worried about you, and she wants you to know how much she loves you. Right now, she needs to talk with some of my colleagues, and then she's going to get some help to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." Amy clutched her teddy bear, processing this information. "Was I right to tell?" she asked in a small voice, uncertainty clouding her features. Officer Rita leaned forward, her expression gentle but serious. "You were absolutely right," she assured the child. "What you did today was incredibly brave. You helped keep your mom safe, and you helped my team stop some bad people from hurting others. That's what real heroes do, they speak up when they know something isn't right." As Officer Rita explained the next steps, she marveled at the resilience of the young girl before her. Amy would stay with her aunt, who was already on her way from the neighboring town. Her mother would receive the help and support she needed to break free from the criminal organization that had ensnared her. There would be challenges ahead, but the worst was over. Mrs. Chen, who had remained a steady presence throughout the day, spoke up. "Amy, you'll always have a friend here," she said warmly. "Perhaps you can come over sometimes to make more paper cranes? They say if you make 1,000 of them, your wish will come true." The child's face brightened slightly at this suggestion, and Officer Rita felt a surge of gratitude for the elderly woman's intuitive understanding of what Amy needed, not just safety, but a connection to normalcy and hope for the future. As the evening drew to a close, the events of the day had set in motion changes that would ripple through many lives. A dangerous criminal operation had been shut down, a family would begin the process of healing, and a community had demonstrated the power of looking out for its youngest members. And at the center of it all was a brave little girl who had trusted her instincts and found the courage to ask for help. The first week at Aunt Joy's house passed in a blur of adjustment and tentative steps toward a new normal. Amy's aunt had transformed her home office into a cozy bedroom, complete with twinkling fairy lights and a handmade welcome sign. The gesture brought tears to Amy's eyes, happy ones this time, as she realized how much thought her aunt had put into making her feel at home. Aunt Joy worked from home as a graphic designer, which meant she could be there for Amy throughout the day. She had rearranged her schedule to ensure she could drive Amy to and from school, maintaining as much routine as possible in the little girl's life. The stability was exactly what Amy needed as she processed the dramatic changes in her world. 3 times that week, they visited Amy's mother at the rehabilitation center. The facility, with its warm colors and garden views, felt more like a retreat than an institution. Amy's mother was participating in an intensive program designed to help her heal from the trauma and manipulation she had endured. Each visit showed small but significant improvements in her demeanor. "My brave, wonderful girl," her mother had said during their first visit, holding Amy close. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. I'm getting stronger every day, and it's all because of you." The sincerity in her voice and the clear-eyed determination in her face gave Amy hope that things really would get better. Officer Rita kept her promise to stay involved, stopping by Aunt Joy's house regularly to check on Amy's progress. She brought updates about the case that were appropriate for Amy's age, always emphasizing how the little girl's courage had helped make their community safer. These visits became something Amy looked forward to, especially when Officer Rita brought her K-9 partner, Max, who seemed to have a special way of making Amy laugh. Mrs. Chen remained a steady presence in Amy's life as well. Though they weren't neighbors anymore, Aunt Joy's house was only a 15-minute drive from the elderly woman's home. Their paper crane project continued, with Amy and Mrs. Chen setting aside Sunday afternoons for folding sessions. They kept track of their progress on a colorful chart that hung in Mrs. Chen's kitchen, each crane bringing them closer to their 1,000-crane goal. "Each crane carries a wish," Mrs. Chen explained one afternoon, as they added 5 new birds to their growing collection. But sometimes the real magic isn't in the wish itself, it's in the patience and hope it takes to make all these cranes. Amy pondered this wisdom as she carefully creased another piece of paper, understanding more than most children her age about patience and hope. At school, Amy's teachers had been discreetly informed of her situation, allowing them to provide additional support when needed. Her art teacher, noticing Amy's interest in the paper cranes, incorporated origami into several class projects, giving Amy a chance to share her new skill with classmates. The pride on her face as she helped others learn was a joy to witness. The criminal case proceeded steadily, with Amy's mother's cooperation proving invaluable to the prosecution. She had agreed to testify against the ringleader, and in return, the authorities recognized her role as a victim who had been coerced and manipulated. Officer Rita assured both mother and daughter that their safety was the department's top priority. Support came from unexpected places as well. The local community, though not privy to all the details, rallied around the family. Aunt Joy's neighbors brought over home-cooked meals and offered to help with errands. Amy's classmates' parents arranged playdates and after-school activities, helping maintain a sense of normalcy in her life. As weeks passed, small victories accumulated. Amy's mother completed her first month of rehabilitation with flying colors. The nightmares that had plagued Amy in the early days became less frequent. The paper crane collection grew steadily, each colorful bird a testament to persistence and hope. One particularly significant moment came when Amy's mother was allowed her first weekend visit at Aunt Joy's house. They spent Saturday morning making pancakes together, flour dusting their faces as they laughed over Mishapen attempts. The simple joy of being together, safe and healing, meant more than any elaborate celebration could have. That same weekend, they visited Mrs. Chen together. Amy's mother had wanted to thank the elderly woman who had provided safety and comfort to her daughter when she couldn't. The meeting was emotional but healing, with Mrs. Chen sharing her own story of overcoming difficulties in her youth. "Life gives us many challenges," Mrs. Chen said, serving her famous homemade cookies, "but it also gives us people who help us through them. Sometimes they're family, sometimes they're friends, and sometimes they're strangers who become family." She smiled warmly at both mother and daughter. The beauty is in how these connections help us grow stronger. The therapy sessions were helping Amy and her mother build a stronger, more open relationship. They learned to talk about their feelings, fears, and hopes in healthy ways. Amy's mother was particularly focused on rebuilding trust, understanding that it would take time and consistent effort. Officer Rita's updates became increasingly positive. The criminal organization had been completely dismantled, with multiple arrests across the state. Evidence suggested their operation had been extensive, making Amy's role in bringing them to justice even more significant. Though she was too young to fully understand the impact, her brave decision to seek help had created ripples that would protect countless others. As autumn turned to winter, the changes in Amy's life began to feel less like upheaval and more like progress. She still spent weekdays with Aunt Joy while her mother completed the rehabilitation program, but their family bond grew stronger with each visit. The paper crane collection had passed the halfway mark, and Amy had started teaching her mother how to fold them during their time together. One evening, as Amy got ready for bed in her fairy-lit room at Aunt Joy's house, she looked at the small army of paper cranes lined up on her windowsill. Each one represented a moment of peace, a step toward healing, a small victory in their journey toward a better life. She thought about Mrs. Chen's words about wishes and patience, about Officer Rita's praise for her bravery, about her mother's growing strength, and about all the people who had become part of their extended family. Sometimes, she whispered to her teddy bear, the scariest thing can lead to the best changes. It was a profound observation for a 7-year-old, but then again, Amy had learned more about courage, love, and resilience than most adults. As she drifted off to sleep, the fairy lights cast gentle shadows of paper cranes on her wall, each one a reminder that hope and healing come one small step at a time. Winter settled into the neighborhood, bringing with it a blanket of soft snow and new beginnings. 3 months had passed since that fateful autumn day, and the changes in Amy's life were as dramatic as the seasonal transformation outside. The rehabilitation center had approved Amy's mother for their transition program, meaning she could now live at home while continuing her outpatient therapy. The day Amy's mother moved into Aunt Joy's house was marked by quiet celebration. They had decided to share the space temporarily, creating a support system that would ease their transition back to independent living. Aunt Joy had converted her basement into a comfortable apartment, giving them both privacy and proximity to family. Remember what you learned about setting boundaries, the family therapist had advised during their last session. Both mother and daughter were committed to their weekly therapy appointments, understanding that healing was an ongoing process. They had developed their own special signals, a squeeze of the hand or a gentle tap on the shoulder, to communicate when they needed space or support. One snowy afternoon, Amy arrived home from school bursting with excitement. Her class was organizing a community service fair, and each student could choose a cause to support. Without hesitation, she had chosen to focus on neighborhood safety and community awareness. Officer Rita, who had become a regular part of their support system, offered to help Amy develop her presentation. "You know, Amy," Officer Rita said as they worked on her project, "your story has already helped other children come forward when they notice something wrong. Your courage is creating positive changes in ways you might never see." Amy beamed at this news, carefully gluing another picture to her presentation board. The paper crane project with Mrs. Chen had taken on new meaning as well. They had passed the 800 mark, and each new crane was more perfect than the last. Amy's mother had joined their Sunday folding sessions, and the 3 generations of women often found themselves sharing stories and wisdom as their fingers worked the colorful paper. Mrs. Chen had started teaching them the significance of different origami shapes. "The crane represents hope and healing," she explained one Sunday, "but the butterfly symbolizes transformation." She showed them how to fold delicate paper butterflies, which they started adding to their collection. Each butterfly represented a positive change in their lives. At school, Amy's newfound confidence began to shine through. Her teacher noticed how she would quietly support other students who seemed troubled or lonely. Without revealing her own story, she had developed an intuitive ability to recognize when others needed help, often leading them to the school counselor or a trusted teacher. The criminal case was progressing well. Officer Rita brought news that the ringleader had accepted a plea deal, largely due to the evidence provided by Amy's mother. This meant neither of them would need to testify in court, a relief that lifted a weight from both their shoulders. The focus could remain entirely on healing and moving forward. Aunt Joy's house had become a hub of activity and support. The spare room that had initially been Amy's emergency shelter was now transforming into a shared project space. Mother and daughter worked together to paint the walls a cheerful yellow, hanging their paper cranes and butterflies from delicate strings across the ceiling. "Look, Mom," Amy said one evening as they added another butterfly to their collection, "when the breeze comes through the window, they all dance together." Her mother wrapped her in a tight hug, marveling at her daughter's ability to find beauty in simple moments. These quiet observations had become precious threads in the fabric of their rebuilding relationship. The rehabilitation center had connected Amy's mother with a job training program, and she was excelling in her computer programming courses. The structure and challenge of learning new skills helped rebuild her confidence, while the flexible schedule allowed her to maintain her focus on recovery and family healing. One particularly cold Saturday, Officer Rita organized a special surprise. She arranged for Amy's class to visit the police station's community outreach center. The children learned about safety, met the K-9 unit, and participated in team-building activities. Amy's classmates were impressed when several officers greeted her by name, treating her with special warmth and respect. "Your daughter is a natural leader," Amy's teacher told her mother during their parent-teacher conference. "She has this remarkable way of making other children feel safe and included." The praise brought tears to her mother's eyes, happy tears that spoke of pride and healing. Mrs. Chen's influence extended beyond their weekly origami sessions. She had introduced them to other families in the community who had overcome similar challenges. An informal support network developed, with monthly potluck dinners where children played while adults shared experiences and encouragement. When I first moved to this country, Mrs. Chen shared during one such gathering, I thought I had to face everything alone. But I learned that community is like a garden, it grows stronger when we tend to it together. Her words resonated deeply with Amy and her mother, who had discovered the same truth through their own journey. The winter days grew longer, and with them came new milestones. Amy's mother received her first programming certification. Amy's community service project won special recognition at the school fair. Their paper crane collection grew closer to its 1,000-crane goal. Each achievement, no matter how small, was celebrated as a step forward on their path to healing. One evening, as snow fell softly outside their window, Amy and her mother sat together in their yellow room, surrounded by dancing paper creatures. "Mom," Amy said thoughtfully, "remember when I was scared all the time?" Her mother nodded, holding her close. "I'm not scared anymore," Amy continued. "Because now I know that being brave doesn't mean you have to be brave alone." Her mother kissed the top of her head, understanding the profound wisdom in her daughter's words. Their journey had taught them both that true strength often comes not from facing challenges alone, but from having the courage to reach out and accept help when needed. As they added the finishing touches to their latest paper butterfly, they could hear Aunt Joy preparing dinner downstairs, the gentle voice of Mrs. Chen who had come to visit, and the familiar sound of Officer Rita's patrol car pulling into the driveway for her regular check-in. Their world, once shrouded in fear and isolation, had blossomed into a tapestry of support, love, and community, proof that even the darkest chapters can lead to beautiful new beginnings. Spring arrived with a burst of new beginnings, painting the world in fresh colors that seemed to mirror the positive changes in Amy's life. The 1,000-crane project was nearly complete, with only 50 more to go. Each fold and crease now came with the confidence of practice, though Amy insisted on keeping her very first, slightly crumpled crane alongside its more perfect descendants. Amy's mother had received an unexpected opportunity that brought both excitement and anxiety. The tech company where she had been interning was so impressed with her progress that they offered her a full-time position as a junior programmer. The job would allow them to finally move into their own apartment, though they had decided to stay within the same school district to maintain Amy's support system. "Change is like a river," Mrs. Chen had told them during one of their Sunday sessions. "It keeps flowing, but you can choose how to navigate it." The elderly woman's wisdom had become a cornerstone of their journey, helping them face each new challenge with thoughtful consideration rather than fear. The apartment they found was small but perfect for their needs, located halfway between Aunt Joy's house and Mrs. Chen's. Amy's mother had insisted on having Officer Rita inspect the security systems before they signed the lease, a precaution that showed how far she'd come in prioritizing their safety. Moving day became an unexpected community celebration. Aunt Joy coordinated the efforts, directing volunteers from their support group as they carried furniture and boxes. Mrs. Chen supervised the kitchen setup, ensuring that cooking essentials were properly arranged while sharing stories about her own first home in America. Officer Rita arrived off-duty with her K-9 partner Max, who seemed to appoint himself the official moving day supervisor, wagging his tail as he followed Amy from room to room. The police department's victim support unit had helped furnish the apartment through a community assistance program, turning what could have been a stressful financial burden into another example of community care. Amy's room was the first to be completely set up. Her paper cranes and butterflies found new perches on strings across her ceiling, their shadows dancing in the spring sunlight. The yellow walls, repainted to match her room at Aunt Joy's, made the space feel like a continuation of her healing journey rather than a completely new beginning. "This is our fresh start," her mother said as they sat together on Amy's bed that first night, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. "But we're bringing all the strength and love we've gathered with us." Amy nodded, understanding that this move wasn't about running away from the past, but about moving forward with confidence. The transition came with its challenges. The first few nights in the new apartment were difficult, with both mother and daughter adjusting to the unfamiliar sounds and spaces. They had developed a routine for handling anxiety, deep breathing exercises learned in therapy, followed by calling either Aunt Joy or Mrs. Chen for a brief chat. Amy's school community continued to be a source of support. Her teacher helped her start a Community Heroes Club, where students learned about different ways to help their neighborhood. Officer Rita became a regular guest speaker, teaching the children about safety and the importance of looking out for one another. The club's first project was creating a friendship garden in the school courtyard. Mrs. Chen volunteered her expertise, teaching the children about plants while subtly incorporating lessons about growth, patience, and nurturing. Amy took particular pride in the butterfly bush she planted, knowing it would eventually attract real butterflies to match the paper ones in her room. One sunny afternoon, as Amy and her mother walked home from the garden project, they passed their old house. It had been sold to a young family, and the sight of children playing in the front yard brought unexpected emotions. Amy squeezed her mother's hand, their signal for needing support, and they took a moment to acknowledge how far they'd come. "You know what I think?" Amy said, watching a butterfly flutter past. "I think that house needed healing too, and now it has a new family to help it." Her mother marveled at her daughter's capacity for finding hope in every situation, a trait that had only grown stronger through their challenges. The tech company where Amy's mother worked proved to be understanding of her situation, offering flexible hours that allowed her to maintain therapy appointments and attend Amy's school events. Her supervisor, a woman who had overcome her own past struggles, became another addition to their expanding support network. Their paper crane project reached its 1,000th creation on a particularly meaningful day, exactly 6 months after Amy had first run to Mrs. Chen's house seeking help. They organized a small ceremony in their new apartment, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. Each guest was invited to write a wish or message of hope on the final crane before it was added to the collection. Officer Rita's wish spoke of courage and community. Aunt Joy's celebrated family bonds. Mrs. Chen wrote in both English and Chinese, her characters speaking of wisdom and growth. Amy's mother wrote about love and second chances. When it was Amy's turn, she thought carefully before writing, "Thank you for helping me be brave." The ceremony evolved into an impromptu gathering, with their small apartment full of laughter and conversation. Looking around at the faces of people who had become family, Amy realized that their story had become more than just about overcoming fear, it was about building connections that would last a lifetime. As spring bloomed into early summer, Amy and her mother established new traditions in their apartment. Sunday dinners alternated between their place, Aunt Joy's, and Mrs. Chen's. The Community Heroes Club flourished at school, with new members joining every week. Their therapy sessions reduced in frequency but remained a valued part of their routine. One evening, as they sat on their small balcony watching the sunset, Amy's mother shared news that made her daughter's eyes light up. The tech company was starting a mentorship program for women and children interested in coding, and they wanted both of them to be part of it. It was an opportunity to turn their experience into something that could help others. "See how life works?" Mrs. Chen had said when they told her the news. "First you receive help, then you grow strong enough to help others. That's how hope spreads, like ripples in a pond." Amy thought about this as she looked at her paper cranes, understanding that each one represented not just a wish, but a commitment to passing on the kindness they had received. Summer brought warm breezes that made the paper cranes dance in Amy's room, their shadows creating patterns that reminded her of their journey. The tech company's mentorship program had begun, and every Saturday morning, Amy and her mother would head to the community center where the classes were held. The program had quickly become more than just teaching coding, it evolved into a safe space for healing and connection. Amy's role was special. While her mother taught basic programming to the women, Amy worked with their children in what they called the Junior Heroes Club. Officer Rita had helped design activities that combined fun with subtle lessons about safety and trust. The paper crane folding that had helped Amy heal now became a way for other children to express their feelings. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't speaking up, Amy told a quiet girl named Lily during one session. Sometimes it's just showing up and trying again. The wisdom in her words struck the adults who overheard, reminding them how profound children's insights could be. Lily had started coming to sessions barely speaking, now she was teaching other children how to fold paper butterflies. Mrs. Chen had become a regular volunteer at the program, bringing her gentle presence and seemingly endless supply of wisdom. She set up a small garden outside the community center, teaching the children about nurturing growth while their mothers learned coding inside. The parallel between tending to plants and nurturing new beginnings wasn't lost on anyone. The success of the mentorship program caught the attention of local media. A community newspaper wanted to write a story about their initiative, focusing on how technology education was helping families rebuild their lives. Amy's mother was hesitant at first, but Officer Rita helped her see how their story might inspire others to seek help. "Your story has power," Officer Rita explained during one of her regular visits. "Not because of what happened to you, but because of how you chose to move forward." The article, when published, carefully protected their privacy while highlighting the transformative power of community support and second chances. Aunt Joy had integrated her graphic design skills into the program, teaching the women how to create websites and digital art. The collaboration between her and Amy's mother showed the children what healthy family relationships looked like. Their easy laughter and supportive interactions became a model for many of the families in the program. One particularly meaningful project emerged when Amy suggested creating a digital storybook about their paper crane journey. The idea quickly evolved into a collaborative effort, with each child in the program contributing their own page. The stories ranged from simple drawings to complex emotions, each one a testament to resilience. "Every story matters," Amy's mother told the group as they worked on the digital book. "Because you never know when your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear." The project became a bridge between the technical skills the mothers were learning and the emotional healing their children were experiencing. The Community Heroes Club at Amy's school had grown significantly, now partnering with similar clubs at other schools. They organized a summer safety fair, where Officer Rita and her colleagues taught children about community awareness. Amy's contribution, a booth about the power of speaking up, drew praise from the school superintendent. Mrs. Chen's garden at the community center flourished under the care of many hands. The children took turns watering and weeding, learning patience and responsibility. When the first butterflies appeared, attracted by the carefully chosen plants, the excitement was contagious. "See?" Mrs. Chen said to Amy, "when you create a safe space, beautiful things will come." Amy's mother's progress at work continued to impress her supervisors. She was assigned to develop a child safety app, combining her programming skills with her personal understanding of the importance of community protection. Amy became her first beta tester, offering suggestions from a child's perspective that proved invaluable. The summer days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Weekday mornings meant day camp for Amy while her mother worked. Afternoons were filled with therapy sessions, now reduced to twice a month, and various community activities. Weekends balanced the mentorship program with family time, often including impromptu gatherings at their apartment. Their home had become a testament to healing and growth. The walls displayed not only paper cranes and butterflies but also artwork from the children in their program. Photos captured moments of triumph, Amy's mother receiving her programming certification, Amy's school awards, group pictures from the mentorship program. Each image told part of their story. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Amy's mother received an unexpected email. The tech company wanted to expand the mentorship program to other cities, using their community center as a model. They asked her to help develop the curriculum, recognizing that her unique perspective made the program special. "Mom," Amy said thoughtfully, stirring the pasta sauce they were making, "remember when we thought we were all alone?" Her mother nodded, understanding the weight of the question. "Now we're helping other people not feel alone. That's like the butterfly effect Mrs. Chen told us about, right?" The butterfly effect, how small actions could create big changes, had become a favorite topic in their household. They saw it in action every day, in the shy smiles of children beginning to trust again, in the determined faces of mothers learning new skills, in the growing confidence of families rebuilding their lives. The support network they had once relied on so heavily had evolved into a web of mutual aid and friendship. Aunt Joy's house was still a frequent gathering place, but now they were often the ones offering support to others. Mrs. Chen's Sunday origami sessions had expanded to include new families, each adding their own paper creations to her growing collection. Officer Rita brought news that their story had inspired changes in police department protocols, leading to enhanced training in handling cases involving children. She also shared that several families had come forward after reading the newspaper article, seeking help to escape similar situations. "You've started a ripple effect," Officer Rita told them during a weekend visit. "And the best part is, you're showing others how to create their own ripples." Amy liked this image, imagining hope spreading outward like circles in a pond, touching lives they might never even know about. As summer progressed, plans began taking shape for the expansion of their program. Amy's mother worked late into evenings, developing teaching materials that incorporated both technical skills and emotional support. Amy contributed by creating child-friendly versions of the lessons, her experiences helping her understand what other children might need. "The strongest healing happens when we help others heal," Mrs. Chen often said, and now they understood this truth deeply. Their own journey had transformed from a story of escape into one of empowerment, showing others that it was possible to not just survive difficulties, but to grow stronger through them. 1 year had passed since that autumn day when a frightened little girl ran to her elderly neighbor's house. The seasons had come full circle, and the neighborhood was once again painted in warm autumn colors. But everything else had changed, transformed by courage, community, and countless small acts of kindness that had created waves of positive change. The community center was hosting a special anniversary celebration, marking 1 year of the mentorship program. The main hall was decorated with thousands of paper cranes and butterflies, each one representing a story of hope. Amy stood beside her mother at the podium, facing a room filled with familiar faces and new friends, all gathered to celebrate not just their journey, but the journeys of many others who had found strength through their program. A year ago, Amy's mother began, her voice steady and confident, "I didn't know if we would survive. Today, we're not just surviving, we're thriving and helping others do the same." She looked down at Amy, who beamed with pride. "And it all started because my brave daughter knew when to ask for help." The mentorship program had exceeded everyone's expectations. What began as a simple coding class had blossomed into a comprehensive support network that had helped dozens of families rebuild their lives. The tech company had successfully launched similar programs in 3 other cities, with plans for further expansion. Mrs. Chen, now affectionately known as Grandma Chen to all the children in the program, had trained other community elders to serve as mentors. Her garden at the community center had inspired similar projects at each new location, creating peaceful spaces where healing could take root and grow. "Gardens and children both need the same things," she told the gathering, her wise eyes twinkling. "Patience, love, and a safe place to grow." The butterfly bushes she had planted now attracted clouds of colorful visitors, delighting the children who attended the programs. Officer Rita stood at the back of the room, watching with satisfaction. The police department had incorporated lessons learned from Amy's case into their standard training procedures. Their community outreach program had expanded, with officers regularly participating in mentorship activities. The changes had led to more families coming forward to seek help, breaking cycles of fear and isolation. "Sometimes the smallest voice can create the biggest change," Officer Rita shared during her speech. Amy taught us that courage comes in many forms, and that true safety is built on trust and community. Her K-9 partner Max, now a certified therapy dog, wagged his tail in agreement from his position beside her. Aunt Joy had transformed her graphic design business to focus on helping survivors tell their stories through art. The digital storybook project that Amy had inspired had grown into a series, with versions in multiple languages being used to help children around the world understand the importance of speaking up and seeking help. Amy's Community Heroes Club had spread to schools across the district. The curriculum she helped develop, combining safety awareness with community service, was being considered for adoption by the State Education Board. Her original club members had become mentors to younger students, creating a continuing cycle of support and awareness. During the celebration, they unveiled a special project, a digital memorial wall covered with virtual paper cranes. Each crane, when touched, revealed a message of hope or a story of transformation. The wall would be replicated at each new program location, creating a growing testament to the power of community and courage. Remember what we learned about the butterfly effect? Amy asked the audience during her turn to speak. How one small action can create big changes. Well, I think it works with kindness too. When someone helps you, you learn how to help others, and it keeps growing bigger and bigger. The wisdom in her words touched everyone present. Many in the audience had their own stories of transformation, mothers who had found new careers through the coding program, children who had regained their confidence through the Junior Heroes Club, families who had discovered strength they never knew they had. Amy's Mother's app had launched successfully, providing a user-friendly way for children to reach out for help when needed. It included features suggested by Amy and other children in the program, making it particularly effective for its young users. The app had already helped several children connect with support services, proving that technology could be a powerful tool for positive change. As the celebration continued, Amy and her mother took a moment to step outside into Mrs. Chen's garden. The autumn breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, and butterflies danced among the plants. Looking back at the community center, filled with light and laughter, they felt the full weight of their journey. You know what, Mom? Amy said, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. I used to think being brave meant not being scared. But now I know it means doing the right thing even when you are scared. Her mother wrapped her in a tight hug, amazed by her daughter's growth and wisdom. Inside, the celebration had turned into an impromptu planning session for the program's future expansion. Ideas flowed freely, mentorship programs for teenagers, partnerships with local businesses, additional support services for families in transition. The energy in the room was electric with possibility. Mrs. Chen joined them in the garden, carrying 3 of her special cookies. In my culture, she said, sharing the treats, we believe that when you've received a blessing, you must pass it on. You too have done this beautifully. She smiled at the butterfly that still lingered nearby. And the blessings keep multiplying. As the day drew to a close, families gathered for a group photo beneath the wall of paper cranes. The image would later be shared with other program locations as a symbol of hope and community. In the photo, Amy stood between her mother and Mrs. Chen, Officer Rita and Max nearby, Aunt Joy's arm around her shoulders, surrounded by the family that courage and circumstance had brought together. That evening, as Amy and her mother walked home, they passed by the house where their story began. The lights were on, and through the window, they could see Mrs. Chen hosting another origami session with a new group of children. The sight brought tears of joy to both their eyes. Their difficult past had transformed into a source of hope for others. Mom, Amy said as they reached their apartment, do you think we've made our 1,000-crane wish come true? Her mother looked at her daughter, confident, compassionate, and strong, and at the community they had helped build. I think we did, sweetheart, she replied. And we made something even better. We helped other people learn how to make their own wishes come true. They stood for a moment on their balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors as vibrant as their paper butterflies. A year ago, a frightened little girl had run to her elderly neighbor's house, carrying nothing but a teddy bear and hope for help. Today, that single act of courage had grown into a movement of healing and hope, touching countless lives and creating changes that would continue to ripple outward for years to come. It was proof that even in the darkest moments, a small spark of bravery could light the way toward a brighter future, not just for one family, but for an entire community.